It's going to make them more fragile. As a matter of fact, I saw somebody said recently that this work causes kids to have mental illness. And I was like, wow, that's a good one. And again, this stems from misunderstanding of the concepts. I'm a big stickler, like you said, operational definitions. I want to be super clear about what I'm teaching. I'm not teaching la, 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 la. I'm teaching you how to be emotionally self-aware. Would you agree that it matters to be clear about what you're feeling?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So when you're clear about how you're feeling, and if that feeling is disrupting you from being a good student or being a good partner or being a good manager leader, do you think that you should use techniques to help you figure out how to manage it?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. That's what we teach. It's really clear. When you have conceptual clarity, I think there's less confusion. What happens is that it's gotten politicized. It's confusing around going back to what we spoke about earlier, that this is obsessive checking in. This is prying into kids' personal lives. Here's the deal. A kid comes to school with feelings. We all have feelings from the moment we wake up in the morning to the time we go to bed at night, even when we sleep. Have you ever been irritable in the morning?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And have you ever noticed that we call it incidental leakage? It's not a great term, but like you're irritable, you really haven't processed it, and you get maybe to the studio here, and then maybe people are trying to interact with you, and you're not like the best version of you.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's what happens. And so that happens to a kid who's gotten bullied on the bus or had a fight at home. And you want that kid, like every parent does, I want my kid to be a good learner, have good friends, etc. All right. So now I'm teaching you a process, Andrew, that before you walk into the studio, I want you to take 30 seconds, maybe 20 if you get good at it, to just check in, take a breath. How are you feeling? Gosh, I'm pissed off at that phone call I had, or I'm annoyed at this. Okay. How do you want to be seen and talked about and experienced in that studio today? Oh, wow. It's a whole, do you see how even saying that, it makes you stand still and reflect? Well, I'm going to be this cool dude who's, compassionate and creative. Okay. Well, what do you need to get there? And then you walk in, and all of a sudden you have attributed the emotion to its actual cause, which is that stupid phone call, whatever happened. And you're no longer going to displace that or project it or take it out on somebody else. Do you think that would be a useful process for kids, couples, leaders to use?
Definitely.
How long did it take?
Seconds.
There you go. This is not obsession with feeling. This is not, this is at opportune moments. When I come home from work, I work long hours and I'm tired and I'm irritable a lot of the time. I just am. I got to switch my mindset to be the best version of myself as a husband. So that's what we're trying to help people do. And I don't want people to be confused by that. I want people to be I want real clarity. It's articulating what your experience is, recognizing that it may be helpful. If it's helpful, you got nothing to do. Congratulations. If it's not going to be helpful, you need to think about those strategies. Is it labeling it? Maybe. Is it taking the breath? Maybe. There have been times I've taken 15 deep breaths and I'm still irritable. I need a new strategy. I need to call a good friend and just say, hey, Doug, can you I'm really struggling with this right now. You got some thoughts? Not a problem. Getting social support is not weak. It's smart. Maybe I need to take another walk around the block to just decompress. Maybe I got a really shitty night's sleep and I just need to recognize that I'm never going to be the best version of myself, no matter how hard I try, because I haven't replenished, the resources of my brain to be the best version of myself.
It's an unfortunate reality, but tap water often contains contaminants that negatively impact our health. In fact, a 2020 study by the Environmental Working Group estimated that more than 200 million Americans are exposed to PFAS chemicals, also known as forever chemicals, through drinking of tap water. These forever chemicals are linked to serious health issues, such as hormone disruption, gut microbiome disruption, fertility issues, and many other health problems. The Environmental Working Group has also shown that over 122 million Americans drink tap water with high levels of chemicals known to cause cancer. It's for all these reasons that I'm thrilled to have Rewire as a sponsor of this podcast. I've been using the Rewire countertop system for almost a year now. Rewire's filtration technology removes harmful substances, including endocrine disruptors and disinfection byproducts, while preserving beneficial minerals like magnesium and calcium. It requires no installation or plumbing. It's built from medical-grade stainless steel, and its sleek design fits beautifully on your countertop. In fact, I consider it a welcome addition to my kitchen. It looks great, and the water is delicious. If you'd like to try Rora, you can go to rora.com/Huberman and get an exclusive discount. Again, that's Rora, RORA.com/Huberman. I love it. And I've two reflections I'd love your reflections on. The first one is positive states and emotions that are also dangerous. When people are feeling over-affiliative, over-comfortable, they sometimes say things that get them into real trouble. They either disclose things or they make jokes that later they pay the price for. This is, I think, maybe not as common as anger and sadness and anxiety, but given that some very prominent, very, very smart people I've seen completely destroy their careers by, it used to be called tweeting. You go, well, this is crazy. This person, actually a chair of psychiatry, I'm not going to beat around the bush here, was fired for saying something that was totally, it was actually inappropriate and lame and stupid. And you just go, but this person is clearly intelligent. They're the chair of a Ivy League school in psychiatry. And you say, well, what happened? And what was interesting to me were the tweets leading up to it. You could say he was showing his true self, but there was this sort of like ease and comfort around joking. And there's certain jokes you just don't make. And so I think what you're describing is equally important for not overstepping, not, hurting oneself or other people.
Activation is activation. So your heart rate and your, different chemicals get released when you're super excited and when you're anxious. Activation might be the same. The psychology of it is different, right? One is like anticipation of like positive things. One is anticipation of, the negative things. And of course, emotions drive our thinking, our decision-making, everything. So, how many of us have made a mistake when we were too excited when we were young? We won't go into those stories now. Excitement without regulation is not helpful. It's funny because you tell that, and going back to the school situation in a minute, that's a big problem with a lot of teachers. They're like, the kid is so excited, they're going to see grandma after school and they can't stop talking about it all day long and it's driving me crazy. So positive emotions can be a pain in the butt too. But they're afraid that they don't want to squelch the kid's excitement. And I say, well, let's talk about it. What do you think? I mean, this is like the easiest solution I came up with on the spot. I said, what's the challenge? He can't stop talking about going to see his grandmother. I said, well, he must love his grandmother. That's a great thing. Have you given him an opportunity to stand up in the front of the class to just tell everybody how excited he is and just let it get it out? What do you mean? You want me to give him the throne? I said, yeah, I want you to try this out. I want you to let him when he's like, blah, blah, blah. He can't stop talking about it. I want you to say, Johnny, I'm going to give you a minute to get up and tell everybody how excited you are, but then we're going to go back to math. We're going to go back to science. And let me know how that works. And of course, 2 weeks later, I go back and visit. She's like, you're a magician. I'm like, I'm not a magician. He just needed an outlet for his emotions. Give the kid the 1 minute to just tell everybody how excited he is, but also let him know that the expectations that I have for you are not changing. Just because you're excited about going to see grandma doesn't mean you have to focus. That's the magic of the work.
Be a channel, not a dam.
There you go.
I didn't make that up. I learned that when I was a camp counselor in Yosemite. You get a kid that, back then we didn't have concepts of ADHD.
Yeah.
You got a kid that back then you would just be like, this kid he's out of control. It wasn't harming him. It was just like would not settle down. You can't just say, hey, sit down. Or that kid would always be getting in trouble, get sent home. So you give them an opportunity to do something, but then you have to let them settle down. Likewise for the kid that was more creative and less physical. If your entire bunk was a bunch of kids who were super physical, that always would happen. But then you find out this kid was had something of value to share with the other kids, and then it would establish his place in this group. There's a very weird thing happening lately online, which is this obsession with the 90s. I grew up in the 90s, so a teen in the 90s.
Whitney Houston.
And there's an example that I saw recently that I think is really relevant to what you're describing. It was a picture of a classroom sitting around listening to a radio. I remember doing this. It was an actual picture, and it said, when the Challenger space shuttle blew up, we all listened to it with our teachers because we were listening to that space shuttle launch. And then afterwards, we went back to our lesson plan. We didn't process it for weeks and weeks. And someone said, gosh, I miss the 90s. Now, at my school is a little bit different. I actually remember the teacher going around the room the next day and asking people if they had anything they wanted to share. And people would share their thoughts. And then one kid said, I heard they found a foot, and then she was like, okay, Garrett, settle down. Some kids were being a bit morbid and stuff. Maybe she shouldn't have done that. I don't know. But there was an opportunity. But I think that was the last it was ever discussed. And we witnessed with our ears, it's not the same as seeing it, but we witnessed with our ears a bunch of people blowing up. And it was true. It was like, okay, this happened. This is tragic. We're going to talk about it for a bit, and then we're not going to talk about it anymore. I'd love your thoughts on the picture I just laid out. What happened, what's happening now, this kind of emphasis on let's get back to when things were not as coddled. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
We were talking about this a little while ago. The world that kids are growing up in now is different. It is a different world. I was not thinking about climate change when I was a kid. I really didn't worry about who was president or not president and whatever's going on politically. I wasn't thinking about, wars as much as people are thinking about right now. I wasn't thinking about artificial intelligence and technology is going to take over my career. So there are real concerns that high school kids tell me they're feeling, and it's really causing them a lot of stress. We haven't created solutions. We're not teaching them how to manage it. We're going to have to learn how to manage it in this world we're living in. So I do think, the challenge is there. I just want to say one thing that's related, which is this artificial intelligence piece that is obviously prominent right now in society, which people are freaked out about for some reasons and thrilled about for other reasons. The thing that I'm most concerned about is that about 20% of adolescents now report using technology, AI, as a therapist, as a companion. Now, do I think you can get advice from AI about stress? Definitely. Do I think it's going to help? A little bit. Do I want people to be in relationship with a chatbot? Absolutely not. And here's the deal. When I was a kid who was being bullied and spit on the bus and my head being banged in the windows, and I came off the bus, what I needed was a human being to say, I love you. A human being to grab my hand. A human being to say, we're going to get through this together. There's no way that technology can replace that. And I would argue that this obsession with technology to solve our emotional problems is a symptom of the thing we started talking about from the beginning, which is this fear of intimacy, this fear of connection, this fear of being present with people's emotions. It's so scary for parents to be with their kids' emotions. I never learned how to deal with my anxiety. I can't deal with my kids' anxiety. I'd rather not know that they're feeling anxious. And then I said, do you want your kid married to a chatbot? And so the real issue, in my humble opinion, is that we are cultivating more and more disconnection. And I think about this, developmentally, and I don't think, in general, I was stressed out as a kid, and I was at the age where video games were becoming popular, and I got that first little football game. I could spend 10 hours a day on that. That was my way of not being in the real world, of not dealing with my challenges, of my parents not connecting with me. Then I got a Walkman, and then the internet came, and then I got email, and then I got social media, and now it's AI. This is just an endless trajectory of outside influences that are pulling us away from being in relationship. And I think I wouldn't say this, I wasn't say this publicly, this is a podcast, is that I never thought evolution could move so quickly. But I do feel that way all of a sudden, what's happening now, this chronic disconnection. And kids are preferring to text instead of to communicate with their friends. There's research, anxiety, stress, and depression are increasing consistently. And it comes back to connection and strategies.
Yeah, a good friend of mine who's a geneticist said it takes a very long time to evolve a species. It doesn't take very long to devolve a species. You can crash a species very quickly. In terms of people feeling overwhelmed and saying, I can't do anything right now because of what's happening in the world. I remember when I was an undergraduate, the 90s were a pretty peaceful time. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had Gulf War and things like that, but relatively speaking. And the professor whose lab I worked in told me, this was in Santa Barbara, where they burned the bank down during the Vietnam War protests. But he said that in the early 70s, very early 70s and late 60s, that you'd be giving a lecture. He was a young professor, and students would just stand up. What about the war in Vietnam? And he's like, this is a physiology class. We're talking about this. And they'd say, what about, and the students would start protesting. So this is not a really new phenomenon.
I agree.
I mean, this was happening. People feeling overwhelmed, people feeling like the campus was theirs. They're going to make noise. I'm not justifying unlawful protest. I'm certainly not justifying any kind of protest where certain students are being restricted. I'm fundamentally opposed to that. But this notion that people are feeling overwhelmed, and young people are full of energy, and They want people to know how overwhelmed they feel and how angry they feel. But in the backdrop, the conveyor's moving forward.
I agree.
But I think that in order for people to feel like, and this comes from the article that was written by you, you quoted a comment. Someone said, we're not overreacting, we're underreacting. So in order for people to feel heard, I want to double click on that comment, but in order for people to feel really heard and understood in their reaction, I think it's also important that our society just can't sit around protesting all day and we can't we can't dissolve into a puddle of our own tears. And I do want to talk to you about the ways that you're formalizing this work, because one thing that I think is wonderful that's happened in the last 10 years or so is that we've moved from the language of consciousness and mindfulness, which I think are great terms,
Of course.
to long exhale breathing, to the notion that stress can be adaptive, Ali Crumb's lab, it can make us better, to an understanding that there's a way of working with your physiology to be stronger and yet acknowledge your physiology. I'm feeling stressed. Now I need to bring my stress down. I'm exhausted. I need to figure out a way to have more energy, work on sleep, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it's happened yet, but I think it's starting that psychology needs the same kind of organizational principles so that people can move past narcissism, gaslighting, claiming everyone that they don't like is being abusive. And there's been a sort of psychological, I don't want to say collapse, but I don't think people know how to navigate this space. Whereas I think mindfulness, consciousness, and the idea that we need to take care of our sleep, we need to exercise, we need sunlight, I and others have worked very hard to try and get people to understand, like, you need to work with your body. You're not trying to conquer your body, but you do need to nudge it and sometimes push it. You don't want to be that person 10 hours on the treadmill who's suppressing everything. And I think where psychology has been a little bit self-defeating is that there's a lot of language. Mm-hmm. And it can start to feel like, oh, this is a lot. I got shit to do. So along those lines, if you are told, so-and-so's gaslighting me, they're a narcissist, that, fascism is taking over and like you expect me to not be outraged, quote, we're not overreacting, we're underreacting. You're a martial artist, you're a very staid guy.
There you go.
Where do you start? What do you say to that person?
Well, I think we have to ask them if they're being effective. And so is whatever you're doing leading to the change that you want it to have? And if they know about emotions, I don't know about you, but when someone is yelling and screaming at me, I shut down. I'm no longer present. And so they're actually not getting their goal achieved. If they're asking me to do something different, or they're trying to help me understand something, if they can't communicate in a way that I can understand it and I want to actually listen, it's not going anywhere. So I think that people need to recognize that I'm a person who is both and. So just to give you a concrete example, our program Ruler, which is the school-based work that we do, is in all the schools in one district of Harlem, New York. 21 schools, thousands of kids, the teachers, the leaders. The deputy superintendent, Dawn, is my former student. They're facing food scarcity. These are really troubled families in many instances. They're facing, obviously, racism. They're facing poverty, home insecurity. Of course, I want to solve for that problem. I would do anything I could to make sure everybody has a meal. At the same time, every one of those kids is being dropped off at school. And we're expecting that kid to thrive for 8 hours a day in that classroom. How can I not teach that kid skills to thrive? I have to. There's no obligation. It's my moral obligation to help that kid be the best version of themselves, no matter what their background is, no matter what their circumstances are. It doesn't mean that I'm not also thinking about that. And I think that people in our society today, this is part of that article, is that we're so focused on the big change. Many of us have very little control over the big change. I feel blessed that I have some control over the lives of thousands of kids that are waking up every morning and trying to be the best versions of themselves, but they need help. They need strategies. They need teachers who are well, who can be the best versions of themselves for them. They need leaders who care about the teachers. And so I think that we have to find in our own way. I know my way, and I sleep well at night thinking I'm doing important work to support people and having well-being. It doesn't mean I don't think about the larger issues. But I do think that the more well people are, the better they're able to be at problem solving around the larger societal issues. I don't think a dysregulated society is going to solve its problems.
I agree completely, and I'm grateful for the work you're doing. I I feel like again, I just draw the parallel to what's happened around sleep, stress regulation, exercise, nutrition. I feel like there's always resistance at the beginning. Like, what is this stuff? Like, I don't want a morning routine. I just want to get up and do my thing. Like, I don't want to hear that alcohol is bad for me. Like, I mean, when I was coming up in academia, alcohol was everywhere. The happy hour, it was a source of a lot of problems. I was never a big drinker. So for me, it was like great opportunity to go do something else. But if you didn't drink with your senior colleagues, it was kind of like people were like, what's wrong with you? Or something like that. I think what causes a tide change is when, first of all, someone creates a structure around things that science shows work. You've been doing that. And I love that you're taking this broader through books, through podcasts, into the school districts. We'll talk more about the ways you're doing it, ways people can incorporate some of this. But I think at some point, a few or more brave individuals start incorporating a structure like, oh, wow, maybe Matt Walker's right. Maybe sleep when you're dead is not a good philosophy. And now the mindset is, well, if you sleep, you're smarter. If you're smarter, you're more effective. And so the people who are doing best are incorporating a structure. And then I also think inevitably what happens, and we're kind of edging up against this now, at least in the sorts of things that I teach, is a pushback. Like, okay, enough structure. Like, we need some freedom. I'm sensing that now. People are like, how many things am I supposed to do? Yeah. And the idea is like, you're not supposed to do them all. You're supposed to do what you need, right? And I acknowledge that that's happening now. That's the contour of sort of the areas that I've worked in and tried to share. In the area that you work in are trying to share, and I realize there's overlap, I feel like the structure is there. I think great examples of people, kids and adults, who are really not just succeeding, not just getting by, but are like really kicking butt by virtue of doing the things that you're talking about. That's what's going to lead to a systemic change. I think about Steve Kerr talks about meditation. And he's Steve Kerr. So you're like, okay, people who like basketball are like, this guy's a stud and he meditates. Exactly. And so meditation is no longer considered magic carpet stuff. Yeah. Right? For every one of these things, that's kind of how it is. It's like breath work. Okay, like I know Wim Hof. Wim was a little bit eccentric. People are like, oh yeah, breathe, exhale. That's like, everyone does that now. So no one's going to be like, oh, now we're breathing. And like, but how much time do we have to spend breathing? And so I think with what you're talking about, I feel like it's central to everything. I actually worry about our species if we don't incorporate the sorts of things that you're talking about. You talk about, the idea of regulating is not suppressing. Like, I think the concepts are critical and the practices are critical. So could you give us a couple examples of the concepts that are just core concepts? We started off this way, but sure. And then maybe a few practical tools so that people can start to think about this in the same way that 10 years ago, we might have talked about like, hey, like you think sleep when you're dead is working for you, but you're actually kind of an idiot when you don't sleep. And you're in a job that requires you to be smart, not an idiot. This kind of thing. Yeah. I think firstly, in my book, I have something called the Dealing with Feeling Wheel. And this goes directly to what you're thinking about. When people are dysregulated, when parents are like dealing with a kid, for example, who's dysregulated, they get desperate. Let's take a deep breath. Breathe. No, let's go for a walk. No, let's cook together. No, let's play a game. No, let's do this. And you go crazy. That's not helpful. I'll give you an example for myself. For a couple of months, I have so much work and I have not slept well. The last week, I've prioritized going to bed early. I prioritized like real dark, the darkened room. And I woke up today at 7:30. I was like, it's a miracle, like 7:30. It's like, it's the middle of the afternoon. And I feel energized today. I feel, and I'm in a good place. And I felt that way for like a week now. I recognize I'm building new patterns for my sleep. It's no longer in my wheel a priority. I figured it out. There are some days where I just feel I can't think straight. I'm like all over the place. I realize that I've been maybe on social media too much. I realize I have like 85 things on my to-do list. And I'm like, Mark, you got to go back to your mindfulness work. You need some breath work. You need to just sit around. You need to take that space. You need to get to that hot yoga class. You need to do this. You need this back into your routine. There are other days I sit around and think, I'm so lonely. I don't talk to anybody anymore. I feel like so whatever. And I'm like, I need connection. I'm desperate for connection. I think that's the way we have to look at it. That there are these components of our well-being that are correlated and are the same as what we do to regulate our emotions. There's the self-awareness piece. Am I at all like paying attention to my emotions right now? There's that breath work piece. There's the cognitive work. There's the relational work. There's the biology of it, the sleep, the nutrition, the physical activity. Like, for example, one of the things that happened for me in writing this new book was that I became very, very committed to my own fitness. Martial arts was like, that was like teaching 10 karate classes a week.
I was younger then. I was in the best shape of my life. Then I got like dumpy professor syndrome. I'm like, I'm not getting on that stage looking that way anymore. I was like, whoa. And I made this major commitment. And one of the things that happened to me was that it became my go-to strategy for my overwhelm and stress while writing my book. And I remember saying to myself one day, like, Mark, you may not finish this book, but you're going to be in the best freaking shape of your life. And truthfully, it transformed my life. Now, here's why I'm telling you that story. Because in the conversation with this friend, Marco, who is a trainer, we started having these conversations around fitness identity and how it relates to emotional intelligence identity. And I realized something magical, which is that now at 56, it's been 4 years that I've like done my 4 workouts a week. I mean, I haven't really missed a workout unless I'm like on a vacation, but I'll still do something else. I cannot not exercise. And this morning, just to be, talking about, coming on Huberman Lab, I'm like, I woke up at 7:30. I'm like, I got to get there by this time, but like, I can't work out. I have to work out before I go to Huberman. Like, I can't show up not doing my workout. And I knew I would feel better. I knew I'd be more present. And I did my hour, back workout. But the point I'm really making here is that I identify as a person who exercises. It's like just who I am. My vision for the world is that we cultivate people who identify as well-regulated. Because if you walk into a room thinking to yourself, I got this, nothing you can say can trigger me. I can get through this, or I can manage my emotions. Life is going to be completely different. And that's why I end my book with this concept that people talk a lot about, like be the best self, and everybody's talking about their best selves. But it really does relate to emotion regulation, and there's good research to support it. That you asked me for like a concrete technique. Well, this is that thing we call the meta moment. And I cultivated this technique with my colleague, Robin. She was a therapist working with patients in New York City. And she's like, I teach them all strategies, and then they go home and they yell at each other. And I'm like, I'm a scientist working in schools, and everybody's like, this is boring, and then nobody wants to do this. I'm like, the motivation is not there. People don't see the benefit. They don't see that their life is going to be better, going to make better choices, have better relationships, etc. So what's going to make a difference? Well, as we know, between stimulus and response, there is space. Okay, so what do I do to fill the space? Well, the first step is I got to sense that something's going on. I got to be aware. Wow, that just triggered me. Wow, that was not cool. My automatic habitual response was going to be, who the F do you think you are? Like, don't talk to me that way, or whatever it might be. Mark, who identifies as the most well-regulated person in the whole wide world, the feelings master, the emotional guru, he has a process. He automatically takes the breath. He automatically builds a space. He automatically takes a step back. He does not go on that gut. He says, there's a better way. But that's not enough. So now I have to think about my best version of myself in my role as a husband. How do I want to be seen? How do I want to be talked about? How do I want to be experienced? In my role as a professor, in my role as a presenter. Different roles, different selves. And I've helped millions of people engage in this process, by the way. And when you build the space to think about your best self, what it does is it pulls you away from the trigger and it brings you back to your values. And then through the lens of Mark, the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence, like he's a different dude. He's a totally different guy than Mark, who grew up in New Jersey being bullied and is triggered. Mark, who's a center director, is like Oz, the Yoda of emotional intelligence. Oh, well, how would he respond to this moment? This is a beautiful challenge. I love it. And so my point is that we can do that for ourselves. We can help other people do it. We can do it in a moment. Ideally, we'll do it proactively. So when you go home or when you come into work, you pause, you identify, and you think about the best version of yourself, and you enter in through that lens. My favorite story about this was, we teach this in schools, and this one kid, when people joke about things, they got it. So I'm in this school, and this teacher is like, Mark, this stuff is, it's really funny. I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, this kid was really, really not being kind to someone on the playground, and I called him out on it. And he came over and I said, I need to know exactly what happened. And the kid said, Mrs. Johnson, I'm going to tell you what happened, but I need you to take a meta moment first. Like the kid knew that if she were looking at what he had done through the best version of herself, she would respond differently. That's the magic of the work.
Well, I think the language around meta moment is something that I'm going to, with your permission, I'm going to help propagate, because I do think languaging and labels is very, very important in terms of getting useful tools out more broadly. Again, not to knock on the mindfulness meditation work that's goes back thousands of years, but it occurred to me at some point, like there's genuine power for mental and physical health in these practices,
Correct.
Yoga Nidra, et cetera. And I had to have a conversation with myself and go, you know what, I'm going to take some heat for this, but I'm not going to call it Yoga Nidra. I'm going to call it non-sleep deep rest, so more people do it. And I apologize, but that's, there was a reason. There's a reason to say, this is the physiological side. Eventually now we know you can just do long exhale breathing, right? Principle's the same. But languaging is so key for people to adopt these concepts, and they can't drink from the fire hose. This is also what I've realized. They can't take it all at once. But you're building a curriculum for
Correct.
people, and it's so important. I'm so struck by the link that you discovered and clearly embody of internalizing a fit person identification. You're a coach of a team. You're not going to be a slovenly coach.
Right.
You're going to show that you also you did all this and you could continue to do it if your students and your players challenged you to, right? Identifying with a certain emotional maturity, regulation level, that is also key. Because for myself, many years ago, I remember thinking, I don't miss workouts. I just decided, I just don't miss them, to the point where sometimes I probably should miss them. I probably overshot the market time.
Sure.
And I learned I don't train sick. I now take weeks off every once in a while. So those are structured around that. So it's not push to the point of self-destruction, but with having an emotional identity that you see in yourself and can live into. I think that's a beautiful thing. David Goggins talks about having to have the old Goggins and the new one in order to be the new one, because both live inside his head. He sat in that very chair and explained both of them are in here, but he has to take actions to be one and not the other every single day. And I think as this language around what we're talking about evolves, I do think it's going to go really far and wide. I have a theory right now, tell me where it's wrong, because it's almost certainly wrong, that many people are very in touch with their extreme emotions of anger, sadness, feeling like they're just, they're too woke, they're fascist, like they're just in touch with the emotions. And then we're really good at putting labels on other people's identities, right? They're a narcissist, they're a fascist, they're extreme woke, but we don't really think about our own identity as much.
Yeah.
We're kind of lost in the emotions. And political parties, people usually know where they stand. But what would this look like to come up, I'm not asking you to do this on the fly, but I'm asking you to do this on the fly.
It's all right.
Should we be thinking about emotional maturity, emotional intelligence? Is there a word that we can internalize? I'd like to be in shape. I kind of know what that is. I want to be a certain amount of strength, certain amount of endurance, I want to be able to run for the plane and not cough up a lung. I also want to be able to open the pickle jar. I want to be able to go up the stairs without pain. I know I have a concept of what that is for me. What is a label that works really well that people can start to fill in the bins of what it is to be an emotionally
intelligent
person?
I think it's emotional intelligence, because it's, again, we need concepts that are clear, that can be defined, that can be measured, and that demonstrate predictive validity. And so every one of the skills, I wrote a book on emotion regulation because that was the area that I wanted to focus on right now, because that is at the top of the hierarchy. At the end, it's what you do with the feelings. That's the regulation piece. But to do that, you need to recognize your feelings, understand them, label them, decide whether you want to express them or regulate. That's the ruler framework. Emotion perception, yes, it's complicated, but at the end, it's about building relationships. I can't know how you're feeling by your facial expression. You know that from Lisa Feldman Barrett's work. But I can make a hypothesis and I can check in and say, hey, did what I say land on you well or not so well? Let's talk about it. The intelligence is the courage to engage. The understanding is, listen, because of my childhood, I have a different relationship to anger than you do. We learned that today together. I see anger and I have fear comes in my blood because I knew I was going to get hit or yelled at or screamed or punished. You have a different relationship with anger. Anger still is about injustice, period. We have to agree that the definition is about perceived injustice. However, My relationship to that and yours is different. Just like whether you're gay or straight or bi or trans, homophobia to someone who is LGBTQIA is different than to someone who's not. I can't relate if I'm not you, but I can have the courage to have empathy for your experience. That's the understanding piece. I'm not going to ever be fully empathic to your life because I didn't live your life. It's your life. So you can't understand my life. You can relate to pieces of it, but I can be curious about it and not judge it. The labeling piece is having that language. What is really happening here? What is the experience? The expression piece is knowing how and when to express with different people across contexts. It's saying, is how I'm communicating landing well? Is my intended outcome a possibility here? Or is the person going to just, run away? And then the last piece is the regulation, which is, in the end, is this emotion helping or hurting me achieve my goals in life? And if it's going to hurt your goals, you need strategies to deal with it. Life is difficult. I don't know about you, but this journey in becoming an emotion revolutionary ain't easy. Now it's politicized, and like we were talking about earlier, it's like, really? All right, come on. Like, what happened? Who was your mother? That's what I want to say. Like, tell me about the relationship you had with your mother. Probably shouldn't have said that, but anyway, I'm okay with it. It's all good. Maybe your father, whoever. The point is that I feel very confident in that what I teach is easily defined, it's measurable, and I can show you my own and thousands of other studies where these skills predict the things that we care about in life, whether it's well-being, whether it's leadership, whether it's decision-making, whether it's just mental health outcomes. And so I kind of have incontrovertible evidence for the effectiveness of it. And so you can still say, I'm not into it, but you have to be educated first. And once you really understand the value proposition, the why behind learning the skills, I can't imagine that every parent in the world wouldn't want their kid to develop these skills.
Especially if these skills are going to be the defining skills of who succeeds and who doesn't. I feel like that's when a culture evolves. And I'm just imagining a future not too long from now where the debate around, and we all know who we're talking about here, one group is saying they're all fascists with no empathy. And the other side is saying, well, they're so caught up in inclusivity that nothing's getting done and people are being treated unfairly. That's what the dialogue
that's our
is,
society,
right? That's
right
the
now.
dialogue. And at some point we got to go, okay, everyone, like we understand your positions, but what are we going to do? We got to move forward. I don't know that there's going to be a meeting in the middle for a while. What is going to happen, I think, is that young people will strive, hopefully, or they'll give up. And I think if the people who strive incorporate these tools and are rewarded for them, then that will become the standard.
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting. The obesity crisis was real.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a discussion around inclusivity. And that has now shifted, in part because of the GLPs, but there's now this idea that, being obese is unhealthy. You couldn't say that 5-6 years ago. I remember during the pandemic, a colleague of mine, very senior colleague, said, we're seeing people dying of COVID, and it's people who are obese. And he said, but you can't say that publicly. He told me, don't say that publicly. That. And so now there's this acknowledgement, right, that, physical health is important, and people are striving for that more. And I think I think that's generally a positive shift. It can be taken too far. But I think that there's this weird moment that we're in where the name calling and the labeling of others, it's not getting us anywhere. The opportunity cost is that we're not actually figuring out like what we're responsible for. And I'm pointing fingers at both sides. And I'm also pointing fingers at myself because
for sure.
I can sit here and say all sorts of things, but clearly we all have this work to do.
Something important about that is that you don't know someone until you know their story. Like I know a little bit about your story now. I want to know more, but and you know a little bit more about my story. And once you know someone's story, you start having more interest in them, more compassion for them. My partner made a movie during the pandemic called America Unfiltered, which was him and his friend. So it's a gay Panamanian running around with a straight Russian around America for a year, interviewing people about what it means to live in America today. And they went to Trump rallies and Biden rallies, and they went into poverty, and they went into all over America, gun shop owners and Black moms whose kids had been murdered by the police, and people who wanted to become Americans, citizens. And it was a listening journey. And it was a remarkable, on how I did a study on this. Actually, I showed people the expressions of people, and I had them judge, would you want to get to know this person? How warm is this person, etc., before they watched the movie. And what we found was that people were very judgmental based on race, based on if they were holding a gun or not. And then you watch the movie and you see the gun shop owner cry when he's talking about his relationship with his father. And that the only way he and his father could bond was over, the guns. And you start hearing his story and you're sort of like, this guy's a really nice guy, actually. And then we tested people afterwards and we found that people had completely different judgments of people after hearing them and listening to their stories. And that's what we need in our society. We need more curiosity and less judgment. And that goes to, ourselves. We'll be much more regulated. We'll have better relationships. We don't have to agree. There's no need to agree, but there is a need to be civil.
What you're talking about are standards.
Uh-huh.
I think what you're talking about is some standards of emotional intelligence, or at least standards for striving. Because if we say there's standards of physical presence, and what does that mean?
No.
Does that mean everyone has to have 8-pack abs and be perfectly, and then you have older people trying to reverse their age and ending up looking like totally
Martian.
artificial, and it can go too far, right? But I think having standards of striving, like every kid does physical education, because even if you're not going to be a great athlete, it's good to develop a relationship to your body and take care of it. Every kid should do emotional intelligence training. Even if you're not going to become Mark Brackett, you can learn to regulate better than your parents. And if you're rewarded, we love rewards, right? We're obsessed with if the promotions and the money and the status, let's face it, people care about that stuff, comes from being healthier physically and emotionally. Who wouldn't want that?
I agree. And it goes back again. I think I'm obsessive about this, being a scientist about yourself. You said this earlier, you, based on whatever, we won't have to go into this right now, but working out is your big thing. But then you realize, hey, a little break. I can take a break. It's okay. It's okay to take a day off. I can go walking on the beach or whatever it is. But that's the reflection process. That's you having that metacognitive ability to say, let me evaluate my life right now. I can have a day without the gym. It's going to be good. I can go have some fun with some friends. I'm the same way. All of this work that we do is about that level of reflection. I have to ask myself when I don't do my workout, is this an excuse? What's really, am I really tired or am I just lazy right now? And that's the work. I was thinking about this as we were talking, that it's a process. And, I came up with this process for myself as I was, writing, with the workouts. In the beginning, you look in the mirror. And by the way, I took photos of myself every month religiously. And the proof is in the photos. And then sometimes I look at it wow, Mark, you really did a good job. Because I really got out of shape and I was not happy with myself. I was used to being an athlete as a martial artist. And now I have 4 years of photos, front, side, back, every month. And you look at the day one and you look at today and it's a completely different human being. I have to look at that once in a while because I still have weird issues. And I look in the mirror and I'm like, and I'm like, wait, the picture tells the truth. But the phases of that are important. The first phase is can I get through this? I can't do 4 workouts, go from 3,500 calories a day down to 1,800 calories a day. There's no way to do all that. Just you can't take every strategy in my book and be obsessive about it. I'm going to breathe and I'm going to walk. No, I'm going to sleep. No, I'm going to talk positively. No, I'm going to reach out. You go nuts. It's a process. This is life's work. The good news, you got your whole life to work on it because you're going to need it forever. So that first phase is kind of just the learning phase. What can I, what's the little steps I can take? The second phase is you start seeing a little bit of changes. Oh, my life's a little bit better. I feel a little better. I'm sleeping better. My relationships are better. I'm more positive. Even during that phase of my workouts, I went through this whole phase of negativity because I'm like, Mark, you're married for 30 years. You're 56 years old. Who gives a shit about your body? And I would do deadlifts. I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. When I'm deadlifts, it's 55 years old. And I would catch myself every time. I'd be like, Mark, this is what you do. You are a self-saboteur right now. You got to pause and you got to, where is this coming from? And how are you going to get that self-saboteur self out of here? The best version of you is not someone who does just 2 sets of those deadlifts. You do all 4. But it was so much work, I can't tell you. But the beauty of all that, of working through the discomfort, is that identity phase. Because now it's not an option. Mm. And so if you just do it and it becomes part of your identity, you don't have those struggles anymore.
I love it. And the parallel between physical fitness and emotional intelligence is not something I predicted before this conversation, but I love it. And I'm certain that it's resonating with people because it's just physical stuff is just so tangible.
Yeah.
It's so concrete. And look, I just want to thank you for making the emotional intelligence piece so concrete and for laying out these steps. We'll obviously provide links to your books.
Thank you. I want to play a game with you for a minute though.
Okay.
You ready?
Okay.
Because one of my former colleagues and I got together a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, and we decided, like, people are so disconnected. So we took all the contents of my books and we made a game. So you actually, when you have your party, it's called the Point of Connection. And so these are random cards.
And it doesn't involve an app or a Wi-Fi connection.
No, you got to be with people.
Awesome.
So there's your first card.
What's the best advice a mentor ever gave you, and how has it shaped the way you live or work? 2 pieces, briefly. The Mike Menser, one of the great trainers, gave me the advice to do low volume, high intensity resistance training.
Mm-hmm.
Each body part once a week, and train only 3 times per week, maybe 4, never more than 75 minutes, but to really learn to enjoy training extremely hard. And I followed that advice for 30 plus years, and I look forward to workouts, so I don't work out every day. Amazing advice. And then the other advice, which is separate from fitness, comes from a guy named Bob Knight, who is a neurologist at UC Berkeley, who said, figure out how much work you can do each week consistently, and then find some way to reset yourself each week that is not destructive. And I said, what's yours? And he said, fishing. And I was like, okay, I've done a lot of fishing because my mom's side, all the men went fishing, and I like it, decent fisherman, but I thought, what is that for me? For me, it's hiking.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone else, it could be something else. But I taught my lab that, and I would teach a career development course where I would pass that on at Cold Spring Harbor during the summer, which is kind of geek summer camp. And I said, that doesn't mean drinking. But maybe 1 or 2 drinks. Someone said, okay, fine. But as long as it's non-destructive, find a way to reset every week and just keep coming back. And so both of those things were about consistency and intensity. So 2 mentors.
All right, last one, because I think this one is more relevant to our specific conversation.
I thought you were going to answer a question. All right. What's one emotion you've been carrying a lot lately that you'd like to experience less often? Oh, man.
Sorry.
What might help soften it? All right. I don't know the name of this emotion. Maybe you can help me. I'll try and describe it briefly. Lately, I've been having these moments of feeling so much love and affection for someone, and it like opens, and then I go, and then it shuts. But it's not opening and shutting because of them. I'm like, and I know this feeling because in a different version of it, I'm about to get a new puppy. He's already picked out. He's waiting. And I know the difference between what I just described, and I just let it rip with the dog. 2 different things. Person, dog, I acknowledge there's a fundamental difference, but I feel this sort of like I shut it down. So what is that emotion of closing down? I guess like shutting off to love. Is that an emotion? Or did I probably just reveal way more than
love is a feeling, obviously. And, but I think, we're going to go back to that opening a little bit about that fear and vulnerability, like just allowing yourself to be with. There's something that's getting in the way there.
So what might help soften it? Time.
Yeah. Just be with it. Let it ride.
Man, thank you for that opportunity. Thank you. I actually really appreciate the opportunity. I hadn't thought about that until I read this. Are you willing to answer one?
Yeah, sure.
You're the guest. I feel like you should speak last. I spoke a lot today.
All right.
I can pick one or you can pick one. How does the game work?
You can go in circles and everybody shares and you look for the point of connection. So it's get to know people at a party, in the workplace. Who is one of your heroes and what does that reveal about what you value? Well, as you know from our prior conversation, the hero in my life was my Uncle Marvin because he helped me get through my very traumatic experiences as a kid. And what I value about him now that I think about it more was that nothing I could say could startle him. Nothing I could say would make him run away. He was just fully present and a listener and a learner and provided steady support.
Well, clearly you've internalized that. Mark, thank you so much for coming back. Your work is evolving so fast and you're doing such good in the world. And do come back again. I feel like you're clearly on the move.
There you go.
And doing amazing things. And again, I'll put links to your book and your books, plural, and other work. But just want to say thank you as a co-public educator and as somebody who's really doing important work in the world. Thank you. You're a really good man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Mark Brackett. To learn more about his work and to find links to his books, please see the links in the show note captions. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please follow the podcast by clicking the follow button on both Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. And you can now leave us comments at both Spotify and Apple. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning and throughout today's episode. That's the best way to support this podcast. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast, or guests or topics that you'd like me to consider for the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. I do read all the comments. For those of you that haven't heard, I have a new book coming out. It's my very first book. It's entitled Protocols, an Operating Manual for the Human Body. This is a book that I've been working on for more than 5 years, and that's based on more than 30 years of research and experience. And it covers protocols for everything from sleep to exercise to stress control, protocols related to focus and motivation. And of course, I provide the scientific substantiation for the protocols that are included. The book is now available by pre-sale at protocolsbook.com. There you can find links to various vendors. You can pick the one that you like best. Again, the book is called Protocols, an Operating Manual for the Human Body. And if you're not already following me on social media, I am Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. So that's Instagram, X, Threads, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And on all those platforms, I discuss science and science-related tools, some of which overlaps with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast, but much of which is distinct from the information on the Huberman Lab podcast. Again, it's Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. And if you haven't already subscribed to our Neural Network newsletter, the Neural Network newsletter is a zero-cost monthly newsletter that includes podcast summaries as well as what we call protocols in the form of 1 to 3 page PDFs that cover everything from how to optimize your sleep, how to optimize dopamine, deliberate cold exposure. We have a foundational fitness protocol that covers cardiovascular training and resistance training. All of that is available completely zero cost. You simply go to hubermanlab.com, go to the menu tab in the top right corner, scroll down to newsletter, and enter your email. And I should emphasize that we do not share your email with anybody. Thank you once again for joining me for today's discussion with Dr. Mark Brackett. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for your interest